Tonight on Nation to Nation, the Assembly of First Nations enlists the help of Murray Sinclair. But what is going on inside the executive offices?
The fact that we got through this agenda this week and that we got a number of key resolutions passed is an indication that we had a very good working relationship this week.
What is happening with the $20 billion child welfare compensation deal? The regional chief for Manitoba is here to explain.
The AFN is talking to many people every day, and politically too, right? I know that there's the legal way, but there's the political way, and right now we're doing both.
And a new environmental guardianship program is getting started. What will that mean for communities?
To be able to manage and monitor their ancestral lands and waters and really act as the eyes and the ears of the land.
Hi, I'm Annette Francis, this week's host for Nation to Nation. Joining me now in the studio is the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Roseanne Archibald. Ani, welcome, National Chief Archibald. Thank you for joining us. I want to start with the internal division at the AFN. Earlier this week, you talked about trying to bring in Murray Sinclair to help to mediate. How do you see that happening?
Well, we're just at the very beginning of our discussions with Senator Sinclair to have him mediate and help us with conflict resolution. So we don't per se have a contract with him at this point. We are in our initial discussions with him. He is somebody who's so well respected across Turtle Island, and he has helped with the child welfare file a couple of times. So we put forward a number of names, and he was on our list, and we approached him, and so hopefully we'll be, by January, kind of solidifying his involvement with us.
What is it like? What's happening? What's going on with the AFN? What's going on in the meetings?
You know, we met before the meeting, the SCA, and we really made an effort to get on the same page, to really be working together, to show people that we have been working together. It hasn't always been easy. We've had many meetings that have been difficult, but the last few meetings have been really productive. We've gotten through our whole agendas, we've moved issues forward, and so we're in a different place than we were in July, that's for certain. And hopefully with assistance from I almost called him Minister Sinclair, Senator Sinclair, and our own knowledge keepers, we'll be able to really repair those relationships fully and create that harmony, working and positive working relationships among us in the new year.
I know earlier in the week, APTN did speak with a chief that attended the assembly and asked him about, what his thoughts were on bringing in Murray Sinclair, if he would be able to help with that, and he doubted that would help. Is it that bad?
No, it's not that bad. And I think that the fact that we got through this agenda this week and that we got a number of key resolutions passed is an indication that we had a very good working relationship this week. And so, a lot of times people don't see the inner workings within the executive because those are often closed meetings. But from my perspective, we're exactly where we need to be. We're moving ahead in a good way. We have our children in our minds and hearts. We have our communities in our minds and hearts. And if we can still always hold that space as we continue to walk that healing path forward, then we will actually begin to repair those relationships in a way that everyone can see that and know that, rather than the rumors of what people think are happening in the executive.
So, but moving forward, there are still there's investigations and human resources issues. How do you move beyond that?
Those things are they're like, think of it as the background. Those things just, they'll keep moving forward in the background while we continue to do our work. So nothing's stopping. Everything's moving exactly at the pace that it's supposed to.
One thing I wanted to ask you, you're the first female national chief in an organization that has seen only male chiefs. Is there in any way, is that one of the issues within some of those internal conflicts?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done this 5 times. I have broken the ceiling, the glass ceiling, 5 times at every single level of our political organizations. And I have to tell you, it's never easy. And it's always a difficult road for the first woman, and I've become used to it. I've become relentless about it. I've become tenacious about it because I know a lot of girls and women are watching. They're watching what's happening to me to know that they can do it, that they can walk through difficulties, and that they can have a dream of, and maybe it's not to be a leader, but maybe they have a different kind of dream, and they can see through me a kind of perseverance that they need on their journey. And I'm hoping that's what they see, is that they don't see me as somebody who is a victim, rather somebody who knows how to walk through a situation with dignity and grace. That's what I'm hoping from the outside people are seeing, because that's what's happening inside of me. And so at this level, it's probably been one of the most challenging kinds of places to come in and clean up and heal and make better. And that's always been my mandate. I've always had a mandate for change. And when you are the first woman, that indicates a big change has happened. And so that change signifies other changes will come. And that's what's been happening at the AFN. However, there's been a real resistance to that change, and that's to be expected. And there's been conflict around that change, and that's to be expected.
But the tribunal ordered the federal government to pay $40,000 to each eligible child and parent. Why didn't the AFN just do that back then and then work out a deal?
There were certain groups that were left out in that process, and we want to make sure that everyone gets compensated. Every single child, every parent, every grandparent, everyone who deserves to be compensated needs to be compensated. And so I believe that some of the class action left out some classes, the tribunal left out classes. So what we were able to do at this meeting was come up with one resolution to cover everybody. So that resolution that the chiefs worked on very diligently and, you know, through many difficult conversations, brought us to that place. And we needed to get to that place together. And we needed Cindy Blackstock to join us in those discussions so that we could really get back on the same page.
Miigwech, thank you, National Chief, for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Time for a quick break. When we come back, more on the Child Welfare Tribunal compensation deal. The regional chief and portfolio holder weighs in. Welcome back. Last week at the AFN Assembly, the Chiefs worked overtime on a resolution about compensation for First Nations children who were victims of Canada's child welfare system. The resolution came after the tribunal rejected a deal that was struck between the AFN and the federal government. The Chiefs ordered the AFN executive to push Canada to pay $40,000 to those who were eligible under the ruling from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. So what happens now? Joining me in studio is Manitoba Regional Chief Cindy Woodhouse. Welcome, Regional Chief Woodhouse. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So first off, we're going to play a clip of Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu and her address to the Chiefs.
On CHRT, I note that the AFN, along with other parties, have worked extremely hard to arrive at a final settlement agreement. I hope that we get this deal completed, and I want to thank everyone for staying with it. And I want to recommit to you today that the Government of Canada will stay with you to get kids and their families the compensation they're owed.
So Minister Hajdu said that she hopes to get this deal completed. Has anything happened since?
Well, certainly. Every day we're, we're still negotiating. We're still trying to get to that end. I think, in hockey, you're right at the net, and you just have to score that goal. And I think that we're just about there. And I know that people are waiting. There's 300,000 people that are waiting for this, and we're very, very close.
So where does the resolution that was passed at the AFN, where does that leave the final settlement agreement?
Well, I think it was very positive, because as you had known, people that were watching the Chiefs Assembly last week, There was many resolutions, and there was many resolutions that, I'll say competing resolutions, and maybe some of them were kind of the same and others weren't, and I'm really happy that, you know, Chief Patsy Corbier, Chief Cornell McLean, in our leadership, you know, we really came together, and even working with, you know, other people that are in the child development sector, like the Caring Society, like we were able to all come together to have one united resolution. And I think it shows that, as you know, the AFN could be broken at times, but at the same time, this shows that it works. When we're united as First Nations, and we're united for our kids, that this works, that we come together and we come up with the best solutions to make sure that our kids are not left behind, to make sure that they get compensation as soon as they can. There's many people waiting and families waiting, 300,000 people.
And with that said, the tribunal did order in 2019 that $40,000 be paid to those that are eligible. Why didn't the AFN at that time negotiate that deal with the federal government and then continue to work on a deal for the others that felt that were left out from that tribunal order?
I wasn't here in 2019. I was just elected in 2021, and certainly when I came on, it was either, number one, they've been fighting in court and court orders and all this stuff for 20 years, probably 15 years, I think 16 years, and then it was either go back to court again because things weren't moving as they should, or start negotiating. And I'm glad that the executive had supported me to be the lead on that and to be the lead negotiator. And you know, we were able to, the AFN was able to secure, you know, substantial, a historic amount of money of $40 billion on the table for long-term reform and $20 billion for compensation. That's a historic win for us, but I wish that this system never happened to our kids. I wish that residential schools and all these things that happened to our people never happened. But it's such a big issue now, and it affects each and every one of our families across this country. Every one of us has somebody that's been affected by the child welfare system, or by a child that didn't have access to services on reserve with Jordan's principal. And I think even though it's a historic amount, I think it's the biggest in the country. I think it's the third biggest settlement around the world, and it's bigger than, you know, it's that some countries around the world, 40 billion, that some countries around the world, that's their yearly money for the year, right? So it's a big amount, but it's a big issue.
You mentioned 300,000 earlier, so that would be 300,000 eligible kids and parents out there who would be eligible. Where are you getting that number from? Because apparently Minister Haidu and Cindy Blackstock haven't actually heard that amount. Where did you get that number from? Well,
we have the data, and you know, and so it's on the child, and then of course two parents, right? So that's how we came up with our number. It's looking at the data.
Okay, so the tribunal documents show 200,000 eligible through child welfare and Jordan's principal. So by your data, there are some people that are missing out.
Yeah, and I think that the AFN, you know, that's why we had expanded it from what, you know, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ordered. We expanded it that more to make sure that more people, more First Nations people would be eligible, and that anybody that was through the child welfare system would be eligible for compensation. It's so important, and it was, you know, AFN was the only one that wanted compensation for our people, and we're going to get there.
Do you feel that delayed the compensation, the deal?
What do you mean?
Because it was 3 years ago, correct? But do you think that instead of taking that deal for the ones that were eligible, did that delay the deal for those ones that were eligible at the time?
I don't think so. I think we had to either negotiate or go back to court. And if we went back to court, it would be another 20 years. So I think when we all got into a room, it's better to negotiate with people. It's better to negotiate with people around the table and having really frank discussions on what you like and what you don't like in an agreement for our kids. Okay. You know, and does money solve everything for our kids for what they had went through? Absolutely not. But it signals that they've been wronged and that we can find some way forward on healing our people once again.
We're hearing from some chiefs across the country, and some are actually threatening to leave the AFN. What do you say to the chiefs that are asking what's going on and how are you going to settle the issues?
Well, I think what we witnessed last week when it came to child welfare, we have many common issues. We have to stay united. We have to work together. And I think when there was all those different resolutions and all these different people came together to make one resolution that focused on our kids, you know, you can have 10 things that you don't agree on and one thing that you can agree on. Focus on those things that we can agree on and work together and help each other. We all need each other.
Okay. So what's next? And how soon do you think the funding will start to flow for those eligible?
Well, we're trying to work as soon as possible. You know, I know that there was a slowdown in November from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. I know that that's being sorted out as we speak, and we're going to have to decide how we're going to move forward on that. We're waiting for their final wording to come down so we can analyze that properly. But I think you know, we're working really hard every day, and like I said, we're at that goal. As a hockey player, we're right near that goal, and we just gotta put the puck in and get a goal, and we're done. And so I can't tell you the exact date that is, but I'm just going to tell you that we're working hard every single day. I am talking to, the AFN is talking to many people every day, and politically too, right? I know that there's the legal way, but there's the political way, and right now we're doing both. So we're talking through our lawyers, we're doing all that. We're also talking to the political people here in Ottawa to try and resolve this very quickly. I want to give good news to people very soon. I think our people have waited too long, and like I said, money's not going to solve every issue that they've been through, but they deserve something for what they have went through. They've been through a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of separation from their communities, our language, our culture. And these children and these people, you know, some of them are now adults, need to be offered healing and that this doesn't happen again. You know, some people would call it the new residential schools, and so we all, like I said, we have a lot of work to do in this country for our kids.
Okay, Chimigwech, Regional Chief.
Thank
you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned for a new environmental initiative. Welcome back to Nation. A worldwide environmental meeting is wrapping up in Montreal, and for some of the participants, it's been a rocky ride. That was last week at a COP15 meeting when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was presenting. He was interrupted by a number of First Nations delegates who were unhappy with Canada over its environment policies. But at that meeting, the federal government announced a new program. Indigenous peoples have long been guardians of the land and environment. It's an ancestral responsibility passed down for generations. Our next guest, Victoria Watson, is a lawyer and a law reform specialist with Eco-Justice. She's in Montreal at COP15, where Canada announced the new initiative called the First Nations Guardian Network. Ani, Victoria Watson, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Annette.
So this program is coming at a time when we are hearing about the rapidly rising number of species at risk and a bleak outlook for biodiversity. How important is it that Indigenous communities are involved in conservation projects right now?
Yeah, it's incredibly important for numerous reasons, Annette. I mean, when you look at the statistics of biodiversity that's held across the globe, 80% of biodiversity is in lands that are inhabited by Indigenous peoples, which really only make up about 22% of the global lands. So it's clear that Indigenous peoples are protecting the majority of the biodiversity, and they deserve recognition of their rights and their connection to those ancestral lands and waters by existing colonial state governance and legal systems. And so Guardian programs provide a great opportunity for the recognition that Indigenous peoples really deserve here in so-called Canada Turtle Island, to be able to manage and monitor their ancestral lands and waters, and really act as the eyes and the ears of the land. And so this is a really important program, not only because it enables Indigenous peoples to be connected to biodiversity and ecosystem conservation and protection programs within their ancestral lands and waters, but it actually enables the passing down of traditional ecological knowledge systems, as well as stewardship practices from elders in the communities to youth who may have been disconnected from their culture as a result of colonialism. So it's really allowing also the passing down of the essential knowledge that is really core to the success of the stewardship practices that we see existing on Indigenous lands.
You mentioned youth. That's one of the next question I was going to ask. What types of opportunities or initiatives are there going to be provided to the youth to get them involved?
Yeah. So, speaking from kind of a more high level perspective, of course, each community has the right to kind of implement the Guardian program on the ground as they see fit based on their unique ecological and cultural community needs. But generally, youth are employed in these Guardian programs, and they don't necessarily have existing knowledge of the land, existing expertise in GIS mapping systems, or existing practices of traditional ecological knowledge. And so that's really a big part of the beauty of these programs, is it's getting youth out to reconnect with the land and connect with their elders. So not only are they starting to connect to their cultures and their traditional ecological knowledge systems, which may have been taken from them as a result of the long-standing implications of colonialism, but they're also starting to learn the language of their lands. They're starting to be able to read the ecosystems, be aware of the unique needs that the lands that they exist on, are really needing in face of the existing climate and biodiversity crises. And that's really imperative in continued cultural existence, as well as the continuation of stewardship practices that have enabled Indigenous people to live sustainably for millennia.
All right, important work. Miigwech, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Annette. It was great to be here.
Thank you, and miigwech, for joining us. That concludes this week's episode of Nation to Nation. If you missed any part of this evening's show, you can check out our podcast at aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm Annette Francis. Good night.